It was a stormy night. The old house stood silent, shrouded in an oppressive darkness, with only a single flickering lantern swaying in the corner of the room. Rain pelted the windows relentlessly, each drop a tiny hammer against the glass. With every patter, a deep, unsettling feeling crept into Shumaila's heart, as if unseen eyes were watching her from behind the walls. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Her mind was a prison, replaying the words her husband, Salman, had screamed just 6 months ago, moments before he died. "I will make sure you never live in peace. I will drag everyone down with me." The memory was branded into her soul, a scar that would never fade. Salman's face, drenched in blood, his eyes wide with a terrifying mix of pain and fury, and then that final agonizing scream. Every single detail haunted her waking moments and twisted her dreams into nightmares. But it wasn't just the memory of Salman's death that tormented her. Slowly, methodically, one by one, her family members had begun to die in bizarre, mysterious ways. First, it was her sister-in-law, a fatal car accident on a clear, dry night. The police called it a freak occurrence, but Shumaila knew better. Then, her brother-in-law, a man in the prime of his life, suffered a sudden, massive heart attack. Doctors were baffled, but again, Shumaila felt a cold certainty that this was no coincidence. And now Shumaila was convinced that a living, breathing shadow had settled over her house, a malevolent presence that fed on their fear. Every night, she heard the same sound, a faint, persistent scratching at the bedroom door, like fingernails clawing desperately at the wood, and then a soft, chilling whisper that seemed to slither through the keyhole. "I'm back." The voice was faint, but it was unmistakably the same voice as the person who had ended Salman's life. The real nightmare, she realized, was only just beginning. Shumaila couldn't tell if what she was experiencing was real or if grief and fear were making her mind play cruel tricks on her. But one thing felt terrifyingly certain. The one who had killed Salman had cursed them all. And now, that curse was methodically, patiently breaking their souls. She couldn't live like this anymore, cowering in the shadows of her own home, waiting to be the next victim. A flicker of defiance ignited within her. Determined to uncover the truth, Shumaila resolved to face the dark secret that had already claimed so many of her loved ones. She had to know who was behind this and why. But she had no idea that the path she was about to take, this desperate search for answers, would lead her to a destination from which there was no return. The journey into the heart of her family, darkness, would demand a price she couldn't possibly imagine. Outside, the storm intensified its assault. The rain no longer sounded like mere droplets. It was a torrential downpour, each drop sounding like a dagger piercing through the fragile peace of the night and through her own chest. And then, a sudden, deafening knock. It was loud, sharp, and deliberate. Someone was at the door. Every instinct screamed at her not to answer it, to hide, to pretend she wasn't there. But the same force that pushed her toward the truth now pulled her toward the door. Her hand trembled as she reached for the cold brass knob. Taking a deep, shaky breath, she pulled the heavy door open. The person standing on her doorstep was drenched, their face partially obscured by the shadows and the driving rain. And as they looked up, Shumaila froze. The ground beneath her feet felt like it had dissolved into nothingness. The face staring back at her was a ghost from her past, a specter she thought was long gone. And in that single, horrifying moment of recognition, Shumaila knew her nightmare had just found its beginning. The face belonged to her childhood friend, Amir, a man who had vanished without a trace over a decade ago, right after a bitter falling out with Salman. His eyes, however, were not the warm, friendly eyes she remembered. They were cold, hollow, and filled with a chilling emptiness that seemed to reflect the storm raging around them. "Shumaila," he said, his voice a low rasp, barely audible above the wind. "I told you I'd come back for what's mine." Before she could even process his words, before she could scream or slam the door, he pushed his way inside. The house that was once her sanctuary now felt like a cage, and the door had just been locked from the outside. Amir's presence filled the space, sucking all the air, all the hope, from the room. The curse wasn't a supernatural force. It was a man driven by a decade-old vengeance. Salman hadn't cursed them with his dying breath. He had been warning them. "You took everything from me," Amir whispered, his voice dangerously calm as he stalked toward her. "Salman, my business, my life. He left me with nothing, so I took his life, and now I'm taking his family." Each word was a punch to Shumaila's gut. The car accident, the heart attack, it was all him. He had been orchestrating their demise from the shadows, a puppet master pulling the strings of their lives, enjoying every moment of their suffering. He was the whisper in the dark, the scratch at her door. It wasn't a haunting, it was a hunt. Shumaila backed away, her mind racing, searching for an escape, for a weapon, for any way out of this waking nightmare. The flickering lantern cast long, dancing shadows on the walls, making Amir look like a monstrous figure of retribution. She realized with sickening clarity that the secret she had so desperately sought was now standing right in front of her. And it was far more terrifying than any ghost or curse. The real monster was human. He smiled, a cruel, twisted expression that didn't reach his dead eyes. "Did you really think it was a ghost, Shumaila? Did Salman's little curse scare you?" he taunted. "The only ghost here is the man Salman turned me into." He was close now, close enough for her to see the manic glint in his eyes, the years of festering hatred that had consumed him. Her back hit the cold wall. There was nowhere left to run. The house was isolated. The storm was a perfect cover and no one would hear her scream. In that moment, she understood the true nature of evil. It wasn't a shadowy figure from another realm. It was the darkness that can grow inside a human heart, twisting it into something unrecognizable. As Amir raised his hand, the lantern on the table flickered one last time before extinguishing completely, plunging the entire room and Shumaila's world into absolute darkness. The only thing left was the sound of the relentless rain and the chilling finality of a promise kept. Thank you so much for joining me on this terrifying journey. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next descent into darkness. Let me know in the comments what you thought of Shumaila's fate. Until next time, stay safe and be careful of the secrets that lie hidden in the past. Shumaila stood frozen, her eyes wide with a terror that clawed at her throat. The face at the door, it was impossible. It was a face she knew intimately, a face she had wept over, a face she had seen lowered into the cold, wet earth months ago. It was Salman, but it couldn't be. Salman was dead, murdered, his body buried miles outside the city. This thing at her door didn't speak, it just stared, a grotesque, twisted smile pulling at the corners of its lips. In the dim, flickering light of her lantern, its eyes seemed to glow with an unnatural light. A cold draft slithered into the room, carrying with it the sickeningly sweet scent of decay and burnt wood. Shumaila's stomach clenched. Salman? The name was a ghost on her lips, a trembling, fragile sound. The figure tilted its head, a slow, unnatural movement. And then it spoke. The voice was his, yet it was horrifyingly wrong, a distorted echo of the man she loved. "You shouldn't have buried the past, Shumaila," it whispered, the sound like grinding stones. "The past never stays buried." A wave of pure panic sent her stumbling backward. She collided with the small table, knocking over the lantern. Flames erupted, licking hungrily at the wooden walls, painting the room in a theater of grotesque dancing shadows. Outside, the storm intensified, the rain pounding against the house as if the heavens themselves were screaming, responding to this unholy presence. For a fleeting second, she thought of running, of fleeing into the night. But when she turned, the hallway behind her had become a nightmare. It stretched on, twisting into impossible angles. Doors materialized where there had only been solid walls. Dark shadows crept along the floor with a terrifying, deliberate intent. And then came the whispers, faint and desperate, filling the air around her, voices of the dead, voices of those she had lost. "Help us! Save us! He's coming!" Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drum beat of terror. She wasn't alone. The curse, the one that began with Salman's violent death, was awake. It was reaching out, growing stronger with every scream, every death, every terrified pulse of her own heart. Her mind raced, grasping for something, anything. The old diary, the one she'd found hidden beneath the floorboards weeks ago. It was Salman's, but its pages were filled with cryptic warnings, strange symbols, and terrifying phrases she couldn't comprehend. "Vengeance has its own shadow. Beware the one who returns in blood." With shaking hands, she scrambled to her secret hiding spot, retrieving the worn leather book. The pages felt wrong, almost seeming to writhe and squirm under her frantic fingers. Then she saw it, a small, hastily scrawled note in the margin of a page filled with demonic sketches. "To survive the shadow, you must face the one who waits beyond the mirror. Only then will the chain be broken." The mirror. Her gaze snapped to the end of the hall, to the tall, antique mirror that had hung there for years, coated in a thick layer of dust and neglect. But as she looked now, it wasn't her own terrified face that stared back. It was a dark figure, standing right behind her in the reflection. A figure with eyes like burning coals and a grin that promised an eternity of suffering. A scream lodged in her throat, silent and suffocating. She ran. Down the impossible hallway, she fled, but it was a labyrinth of her own fear. Every door she tore open revealed another identical hallway. Every turn looped her back to where she began. The storm outside raged in perfect sync with the tempest in her soul, and then she heard it. Footsteps, slow, methodical, unstoppable, following her. She knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that the thing from the mirror was now in the hallway with her. It was coming for her. And this time, there would be no escape, no one left to save her. In a last desperate act of faith, Shumaila whispered a prayer, clutching Salman's diary to her chest like a shield. The curse, the shadow, the warnings, it all clicked into a terrifying clarity. Something deep within her, a primal instinct for survival, screamed that the only way out was through. She had to confront it. With trembling legs and a heart pounding like a war drum, she forced herself to stop. She turned and stepped directly in front of the ancient mirror. The reflection rippled, the glass distorting as if it were water, and then, as if the very fabric of reality were tearing apart, the shadow pulled itself out of the mirror. It was Salman. But it wasn't. The man she had loved, the man she had mourned, was gone. In his place stood this hollow, twisted mockery, its eyes black, bottomless voids, its smile stretched impossibly wide across its gaunt face. "You can't escape me, Shumaila," the shadow hissed, its voice a venomous poison. "Revenge always finds its way." In that instant, the last of the flames from the overturned lantern died out, plunging the entire house into absolute darkness. Rain lashed against the windows like a barrage of sharp nails. And Shumaila, clutching the only clue she had, realized with chilling finality that the night was far from over, and what awaited her in the shadows was something no living soul was ever meant to face. "Thank you so much for joining me on this terrifying journey. If you want to find out what happens to Shumaila, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next part. Stay safe out there. The room was utterly consumed by darkness, a thick, suffocating blackness that pressed in from all sides. My hands, I remember them trembling, clutching Salman's diary like it was the only solid thing in a world that was falling apart. The air was heavy, and a chorus of whispers started to creep in from the corners, growing louder, echoing in a way that made my skin crawl. That's when I saw it. The shadow that had crawled out of the mirror took a deliberate step towards me. The room itself seemed to react to its presence, the walls pulsing like a dying heart, the floor twisting under my feet. A cold certainty washed over me. This was no simple ghost. It was alive, a creature born from pure vengeance, and with every frantic beat of my own heart, I was feeding it, making it stronger. Why? Why are you doing this? The words tore from my throat, a broken whisper that barely pierced the oppressive silence. The shadow tilted its head and a sound escaped it. Not quite a laugh, not quite a growl, but something terrifyingly in between. You buried the truth, it rasped, its voice a symphony of scraping metal and rustling leaves. You thought by hiding the crime, by pretending it never happened, you could erase it. But revenge doesn't forget. And just like that, the memories of that night flooded back, the night Salman died. The betrayal I never saw coming, the cold, malicious smile of the real killer who had vanished into the shadows, leaving me to piece together a nightmare. It all hit me at once, and then I understood. The shadow wasn't just Salman's ghost, twisted by anger. It was an embodiment of every injustice, every lie, every hidden crime connected to that night. It had been lurking, gathering strength, feeding on the silence, just waiting for this exact moment. Waiting for me. A surge of something. Defiance, maybe, cut through the fear. I took a deep breath, my mind racing. I couldn't run. I had to fight. I had to uncover the truth, no matter what it cost me. My fingers scrambled through the diary pages, searching for an answer, for anything. And there it was. A sketch, hastily drawn but clear. A ritual. A way to confront the shadow, to trap it in the liminal space between life and death. But it demanded a heavy price. Courage, blood, and speaking the true killer's name aloud. I steeled myself, the diary held tight in my trembling hands. The storm outside raged, a perfect reflection of the chaos inside me. "I will face you," I said, my voice gaining strength, trying to rise above the wind and the whispers. "I will uncover the truth, and I will end your revenge." The shadow actually recoiled, just for a second, as if startled by my defiance. Its dark, shifting form flickered, and the fire in its eyes burned hotter, more intense. "Brave, but naive," it hissed. "You think you can undo what has been done?" A brilliant fork of lightning split the sky, illuminating the room for a heart-stopping second. In that flash, I saw the figure more clearly, twisted, hollow, a terrifying mockery of a human form. But behind the monstrous facade, I saw him. Glimpses of Salman, his true self, trapped and distorted by an all-consuming rage. That glimpse was all I needed. Gathering every last shred of courage I possessed, I began the ritual. The words from the diary felt foreign and ancient on my tongue. I chanted them, my voice growing stronger with each syllable. And then, I did it. I called out the killer's name, the real person who orchestrated everything, the one who hid in plain sight while revenge festered in the dark. The shadow let out a high-pitched scream of agony that made my ears ring, a sound of pure, unadulterated pain. It surged toward me faster than I thought possible. The floorboards beneath me cracked and splintered, the walls shuddered violently, and the whispers of the dead became a deafening, soul-shattering roar. My vision blurred. For a terrifying moment, I thought I was about to be torn apart, consumed by the very darkness I was trying to fight. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. I held the diary high, a makeshift shield against the encroaching nightmare. I kept chanting the name, focusing all my will on the truth, on dragging the hidden evil into the light. The shadow faltered. Its form flickered like a dying flame, its edges beginning to fray and crumble. Pieces of the darkness peeled away, and in its place, a face began to form. A face I knew. The face of the real killer, hidden within the vengeful spirit. It was someone I had trusted, someone who had smiled at me day after day, all while plotting this destruction. You... I gasped, my heart pounding in my chest as rage, horror, and a strange, sickening relief collided within me. The shadow shrieked one last final time, a sound of defeat and despair, before collapsing in on itself, vanishing into thin air like a puff of smoke. And then, silence. The storm outside had passed. The room was calm, still. I could breathe again, the air clean and crisp. The whispers of the dead faded away, replaced by an eerie, unsettling peace. I had survived. I had faced the shadow, and I had dragged the truth, kicking and screaming, into the light. But as I stood there, alone in the quiet aftermath, a cold thought settled deep in my bones. Revenge never truly ends, does it? It just changes form. And some shadows, no matter how hard you fight them, no matter how far you chase them away, always find a way to linger. Thanks so much for joining me on this terrifying journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. Stay safe out there. The room was silent, almost too silent. My chest heaved, my whole body still trembling from the fight with the shadow. The storm outside had finally passed, leaving only the soft, rhythmic patter of rain on the roof. The world seemed calm, almost peaceful. But inside this house, inside me, I knew the battle wasn't over, not even close. I sank to the floor, clutching Salman's diary. Its pages were damp, a mix of my sweat and tears. The cryptic words that once confused me now screamed with clarity. The shadow. It had been feeding on guilt, on unspoken betrayals, on fear. By calling out the truth, I had weakened it, but shadows, like vengeance, never truly disappear. And then I heard it. A whisper. Not a loud, terrifying roar like before, just a soft hiss right at the edge of my hearing. You cannot hide from me, not forever. I froze. My heart skipped a beat. Was it the shadow, or was it something else? I frantically looked around. The candlelight flickered, casting long, distorted shapes across the walls. Everything looked ordinary, but the air was thick with tension, so heavy I could barely breathe. In that moment, I understood. The shadow was a manifestation, a warning, a tool. The real threat wasn't just a spirit haunting a house. It was the killer still out there, the one who had orchestrated Salman's death and all the chaos that followed. Someone who had remained hidden, smiling while the world around them burned to the ground. With a new, chilling determination, I left the house that night. I stepped out into the rain-soaked streets, pressing Salman's diary to my chest like a shield. Every shadow seemed to stretch and follow me. Every passing face in the dim streetlights looked like a potential threat. I had no friends to trust, no family left to turn to, only my own resolve and this burning need for justice. The days that followed were a blur of paranoia and investigation. I dug deeper, retracing every step, every secret meeting, every hidden argument Salman had documented in his diary. The puzzle pieces, once scattered, began to fall into place. The killer had to be someone close to him, someone who knew every weakness, every fear, every single secret he kept. My search led me to the edge of the city, to a desolate, forgotten warehouse. The air inside was thick with the stench of mold and decay. It was the kind of place where hope goes to die. And there, in the center of the vast, empty space, sitting calmly in the shadows, was a figure. They were smiling, waiting for me. "You found me," the figure said, their voice soft, almost mocking. The sound sent a tremor through my entire body. It was familiar, too familiar. My stomach churned with a sickening mix of dread and recognition. It was Salman's old business partner, the one no one had ever suspected, the one whose quiet greed and envy had ignited this entire chain of death and darkness. "You killed him," I whispered, the words barely escaping my lips as pure rage flooded my veins. "All of this, the deaths, the horror. You did this." The man's smile widened, a cruel, self-satisfied twist of his lips. "I did what was necessary. He was in my way. But look at you. You've grown stronger, strong enough to face me. Perhaps it's time for you to finish what you started." My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to stand tall. I held the diary open, its pages seeming to glow faintly in the gloom, a guide to confronting the evil standing right in front of me. "Your shadow, your lies, they end tonight," I said, my voice firm, unwavering. His expression finally darkened. The game was over, and then something completely unexpected happened. The shadows in the warehouse began to twist and writhe, coiling together, forming the same horrifying figure I had faced in my house. But this was different. It wasn't just in my mind. It was real, a physical manifestation of the killer's own guilt, his fear, and his unspeakable crimes. The shadow surged forward, not towards me, but towards him. It reached for the man who had created it, its dark tendrils pulling him into an abyss of his own making. He screamed, a raw, guttural sound of pure terror, trying to fight it off, but it was unstoppable. I could only watch, frozen, as the crushing weight of his own vengeance consumed him, finally balancing the scales of justice. As the last echoes of his screams faded into silence, a terrifying but freeing thought settled in my mind. The shadow, the curse, the revenge, they were all tied to the truth. If you expose it, if you confront it, you can survive. But if you hide it, it will grow in the dark and consume everything. Outside, the first light of dawn was breaking. The storm was long gone. But I knew, deep down, that life would never be the same. Shadows have a way of lingering even when the fight is over, and some revenge, no matter how complete, always leaves a mark. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. If you were captivated by this story, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe and be careful what secrets you keep. The dawn light seeped through the broken windows of the warehouse. Outside, the world felt distant, almost unreal. I stood among the remnants of the shadow, my chest heaving, my mind still reeling from the night's horrors. The air was finally quiet. The storm had passed, yet the tension lingered like a ghost in the room. I glanced at the diary. It was damp and tattered now, but its pages had been my guide, my lifeline through this nightmare. The shadow was gone. The killer had been consumed by the consequences of his own terrible crimes. But a part of me knew this was just a pause, a temporary reprieve. Evil, much like vengeance, never truly dies. It just waits. As I stepped outside, the city looked as if it had been washed clean by the rain. Birds chirped faintly, and the streets glistened under the morning sun. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of relief. But it was fragile, like thin ice. I knew that every creaking door, every passing shadow could still hold a hidden danger. Weeks turned into a month, then 2. I returned to my home, slowly, cautiously, trying to piece my life back together. The memory of Salman haunted me, a constant ache in my heart, but now it was tempered with a new resolve. I was stronger, wiser, and more alert than ever before. Yet in the dead of night, when the world was asleep, I would sometimes feel it. A faint chill crawling up my spine, a whisper carried on the wind. We are still here. I tried to dismiss it as my imagination, just a leftover echo of the horrors I had endured. But you can't just wish away the darkness. One evening, I decided to review Salman's diary one last time, hoping to finally close that chapter. That's when I saw it. A line I had somehow missed before, scribbled in the margin. The shadow teaches, the shadow warns, but the shadow never truly leaves, until the cycle of vengeance is broken completely. A cold dread washed over me. It wasn't just about punishing the guilty. It was about understanding the darkness that had taken root inside of me and confronting it without fear. That night, I made a decision. I locked all the doors, lit candles throughout the house, and stood in the center of the living room. I took a deep breath and spoke into the silence, my voice firm. I am no longer afraid. I face you, shadow, wherever you may linger. For hours, nothing happened. The silence was absolute. Then, just as I was getting ready for bed, I saw it, for a fleeting second, in the reflection of the mirror. A silhouette, a dark figure watching me silently, waiting. My heart skipped a beat, but this time I didn't scream. I stood tall, my gaze locked on the reflection. I recognized it not as a threat, but as a reminder. The past will always be a part of you, but courage can tame even the darkest shadows. The next morning, I left the house at sunrise. The air was crisp, the world was calm, and a strange sense of peace settled over me. I had survived the horrors, faced the shadow, exposed the killer, and reclaimed my life. But deep down, I knew that life would never be simple again. The shadow of revenge had left its mark, on my soul, on my heart, but I had emerged stronger, unbroken. As I walked down the street, the wind carried a soft whisper one last time. Remember, we are always here, watching, waiting. I smiled faintly, a mixture of fear and triumph in my eyes. I knew that whatever came next, I was ready. The shadow might linger, the darkness might return, but I had learned the ultimate truth. Courage, truth, and resolve are stronger than any curse. And with that, the story of the shadow, of revenge, of horror and survival came to a close. For now. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. Until then, stay safe and stay brave.